It can get quite overwhelming when we write scientific reports because there's just so much information to take in and understand, and we often feel like I have to include this, I have to include this, and we end up including nothing, and our paper looks very bleak. And even if we do, our paper is very, not satisfactory. And so today I'm going to synthesize all the information that's out there. And so we're going to look at a few key points that should run throughout your paper, and we're going to ensure this through examples and everything. So without further ado, let's just get straight into the video. Okay, so now let's look at some key tips when it comes to scientific writing. Alright, so when you write a scientific paper, your goal is not just to present results. You need to tell a story. When you present results, when the main focus is delivering results, the entire paper outlines everything you did and then says something reasonable about it. So that's quite normal. However, when you're just saying that, look, as X increases, Y increases, and you have a graph, that's raw data, that's just providing raw data, and that is of limited value. And it's usually only can usually only be interpreted by experts in that field. So real value is attributed to the insights and understanding of the data. And so that's when you have to present a story. If you look at this flowchart over here, you have the data and that's the results. That's just you presenting the results. You want to extract the information. This is only something that experts can do. Then you want to show, but then here's where you start presenting the story. The last 2 points, your knowledge and your understanding. Here's where you show them that you know. In the knowledge, you want to show them that, look, this is the insights, and understanding is what we can learn from these insights. So that's what that means. Okay, so now there's 3 key other things to keep in mind: brevity, logic and clarity, and clean typing. So brevity. It is essential to maintain brevity. Choose words selectively. Don't just use words to sound smart. It's not going to make you sound smart. In fact, teachers or professors can easily recognize that this person is trying to sound smart. This person is desperate. And that kind of makes you sound even dumber. So don't use too many words, because that's going to make you sound dumb to experts. It's going to waste the reader's time, and they're probably just going to leave your paper. Okay, logic and clarity. Your arguments, so your points, should be arranged step by step so that the reader can easily follow and understand what you are trying to say. And this comes from planning. You want to plan it so that everything is in proper order. The reader should feel as if they're absorbing ideas, not reading. When you read a good book and you get so absorbed into it that you're just reading, just flipping pages. You're not even paying attention that, oh, well, I had a target of reading 5 pages. No, you're just reading. And that's exactly what you want to do here. You want to make it flow very nicely. And this is something that we're going to look at over the next few videos, right? Because it had to maintain and get that flow. It varies from if you're writing the method to the discussion to the results. So there's every section has a different way of creating and maintaining that flow, and that's something very important we'll look at, and that's something you can only probably learn from examples. Okay, next, clean typing. If it's well organized, the reader will naturally believe that there is a good well quality written text in here. It's a good quality of text, even if it's not. Like, a good organization can make up for bad language. So you want to have a good manuscript, and you want to make it something that suits your own style, but also looks something straight out of, a scientific journal. And so here's the manuscript that I've come up with. So when you're writing normal text, you want to use Cambria 11 or 12 size. For captions, for photos and stuff, and graphs, you want to use Calibri. If you're writing the title, you want to put Cambria in bold with 18 font size. Subtitles, I like using Aptos, and yeah. So that's that. Next, okay. Will the reader understand? Your college teachers and professors and everyone that you work with, like everyone in your group, they will understand what you want to say. But here's the thing, the reader will not, because if you're going to jump straight into the specifics, they're going to be like very, they're going to feel very isolated. So you will have, because when you work with your colleagues and they're going to be all well educated about the topic, and they're going to be thinking it from the perspective that you think it, because you're going to tell them the story. But when you write the article, the writer needs to be aware. So you need to be aware that the reader is not as well educated and it doesn't have that much context, doesn't have that much personal context about you as the colleagues. So a written text is therefore not an information repository, nor it is a naturally occurring flow of words and sentences. It is an artifact created for a reader. The aim is not simply to make it possible for the reader to understand. The narrative should be so strong enough to make it impossible for the reader not to understand. So you don't want to just have a flow of words and the reader forgets what they're actually reading. You want to have it so that it's a narrative that they can't not understand. Like if they read it, they should get it the first time. If they read it the second time, their understanding should be further rooted. That's how you want to make it. And this is a quote from a book called Science Research Writing, and that's a book I'd recommend to check out if you're having struggle. And yeah, it helps a lot and also forms the basis of today's presentation. Okay, next. You want to use science as a language. And this is something called narrative rap. Okay, so if you want to communicate your research, you have to use science as a language. Basically, you have two things when it comes to writing a scientific report. You have your framework and your language. So first of all, what's your framework? Your framework is your planning. So this is titles, subheadings, order of graphics, how you want to present the information, how you want to present the captions, how you want to add the images depending on how you're going to refer to them in the text. That's all your framework. That's all your planning, as you can see here in the green area. Now, what is your writing? Your writing is that's the actual body of your framework, right? Of your entire thing. That's what your framework refers to. So here you want to comment on and identify the function of information. And you want to create paragraph, entry, sentences. You want to create phrases. You want to use words such as although, however, that, bring your reader into a direction. And this is something we'll look over because all of these key points are important to understand, and this is something that runs as a motif throughout your entire paper. And so it definitely changes when you're writing the introduction, when you're writing the method. And so this is something we'll look at specifically in the next few videos. But these are just key points. These are just things to keep in mind so you don't start overthinking. So planning refers to like how you want to put the images, how you want to structure it, and then writing is how you want to comment on the information. You can use evaluative language. You can say a striking difference, or you can say a subtle difference. And those are the kind of things that you want to have in your writing. So this is how you create that narrative wrap that, wraps the reader into what you are writing about. Now let's look at the strategy for science writing. Okay, you want to build sentence-based, paragraph-based model. So basically what happens is that when you write a paper, it's going to be in a field, right? And there's going to be multiple papers in that field. So you must look at all those other papers in the field, and you want to see how they organize their information. And then what you do is that you create models based on them. So you can say that, for example, this sentence identifies a gap in the research, or this paragraph maps the contribution of this study into the literature. So you want to create those mental annotations, and you can also do that in diagram. And we've done this a lot throughout the next few videos when we look at introductions and all that. And basically, when you have this idea, when you have this structure, all you have to do is take what the structure they've used, and then you can combine structures and stuff and create your own structure, and then you can use that information and put your information into that structure, and that creates something new, something original, but also it is in the conventions of that specific field that you're studying. Okay, second, you want to mine successful text for vocabulary. So again, look at all your texts in that field, and you want to see what kind of words they use, and if you start really early and you have a lot of time, try creating a book or a notebook or a piece of paper. Just on a piece of paper, write down ideas, write down words that they use, write down words that you think are really important and will make you sound connected to that field. So that's how you want to mine them for vocabulary. Because they will use phrases. Let's say they want to say a gap in the research, like there's a gap in the research. They'll use a specific phrase for that. You can copy paste that phrase. You can probably make a few changes over here and there, And then what you do is that makes you sound authentic. Okay, now the third thing, you want to identify and master the relevant grammar, language, and writing skills. You see, when you're writing in that field, when you write a story and when you write a scientific paper, that story and that scientific paper are kind of different, right? You feel that they're different, like the writing styles are different. So a story uses adjectives and descriptive language, and if it wants to describe this pencil, it will use 100 words. Whereas a scientific paper, if it wants to describe this pencil, it will just say, well, look, a red pencil with black stripes, something like that. It just wants to get the message of it. And this is something that happens in different fields in science. So a biology paper, and you compare that to a physics paper, they're going to use different language styles, just like how a story with a scientific paper, a biology paper and a physics paper have different ways of writing. And so when you're writing a specific paper, you also want to go into that field. You want to see how they structure and how they use grammar, language, and writing skills, and then you want to get an idea. And once you have that idea, you can create a paper that also fits their conventions. So the strategy really is study other papers. And if you take a few phrases of other papers, that make sure it's not like facts you're taking, but take phrases, and you can put those phrases in there, and you can sound a bit original. Put them in the original manner, so that you're using good phrases that make you sound smart, that make you sound genuinely smart, but then you're also not copy pasting, because that would be plagiarism. Okay, now let's look at a few rules when it comes to scientific writing. First of all, no need to make it stylish or elegant. The primary aim is to communicate clearly and accurately. Using elegant English may actually make your research article less accessible. When we're writing and we're like, I want to sound smart, or I want to take up space, why isn't this paragraph more than 100 words or something? And we unnecessarily add information that makes it sound elegant. For example, that's just going to make you, sound dumber, right? Because that's something we've said before. So if you're going to try making it stylish or elegant, the reader might think this is a waste of time, and they might leave your paper. Because sometimes what we do is that, let's say I have the word framework, and then I start a sentence and say this framework was blah blah blah, and then the next sentence, when I want to refer to that framework, I'll be like, let's make it stylish and elegant and use another word. And I said, instead of saying this framework, I say this model. And so although I think I'm using words and making it sound, oh look, I'm so smart, but you know what this does? It is very counterproductive. Basically, the reader will think, okay, so there's a framework, there's a model, there's so much to keep in mind, because then they'll start creating differences. They'll think the framework is different from the model, and it will be really difficult for them. However, if I just state it as a framework, and in the next sentence I use the same word framework, what that does, it will create an echo, which enables the reader to recognize and track concepts through the paper. And this is much more effective. Okay, now the second rule. Good organization and good writing can compensate for bad language, but error-free language does not compensate for poor organization or poor writing. When you have good organization and good writing, everything is, the reader can clearly identify what's going on and what important piece of information is where. They'll often neglect the poor language. But if you have extremely good scientific language, if you've mastered it, but the reader can't quickly identify what they want to see, like if they want to know what the paragraph's about, they'll probably look at the first sentence of the paragraph, and if they don't get what the paragraph's about, even if it's written at like the highest top-notch levels, it's not going to compensate for that bad organization. Because in most cases, if your scientific paper is going to be read along with millions of others, the key focus of the person that's deciding which one they want to give the highest mark or which one they want to choose, it's going to be all about how it's organized, because they're going to be skimming it. They're not going to be reading every paragraph in detail, and so they won't have enough time to acknowledge that language, that good language. They will when they select it and then write it. So both of them are important, but in most cases, please focus. And first of all, please focus on having good organization, because otherwise, even if it's good, and it's not presented well, the reader will think that, or the marker will think that this is worthless. So If you have good language, that's good. But before you start, and if you don't have good language, please first focus on your organization skills. Okay, let's look at the next thing. Okay, so key messages. Here are the key messages that we take away. Okay, so first of all, the content of your scientific research should be accessible to all readers. So you want to use language. This is where the language comes in. Not choosing, I want to publish it in this journal or that journal. That's what the language is. Okay, the reader needs to be shown the function of data or information, not just presented with it. Okay, that's the second point. Now C, the aim is not simply to make it possible for the reader to understand. The aim is to make it impossible for the reader to understand. Okay, and fourth, evidence-based guidance can be obtained by studying the structure and language of successfully published papers. So these 4 messages are what we've looked at before. Now let's look at verbosity. Okay, verbosity is a silent killer. You may think it makes you sound smart, but in reality it doesn't. Basically, first of all, let's look at verbosity. So being overly verbose, which means that you're using too many words. So let's look at this example. Our research designed to test the fatal effects of PGF2 alpha on dogs was carried out by intravenously introducing the drug in the experiments, a relatively small quantity. Like, there's so much that we don't need. Like, relatively small quantity. Like, no, we don't care. We just want the quantity. And intravenously, like, really, the fatal effects. Like, come on, like, most of this information we don't need. Cut it. And so then what happens when we cut it? Intravenous injection of 30 milligrams prostaglandin of PGF2 alpha to each of 10 dogs, killed them within 5 minutes. There we go. Straight, simple, straight to the point. We get all the information. But here's the thing. Don't make it too simple. Like, look at this example. Young, mature, sprawl dolly rats, 200 grams, Charles River, Italia, were and then used. Like, come on, what is this saying? What is Charles River, Italia? Is that guy the owner of the rats? What's going on? Do the rats weigh 200 grams? Like, what's going on? What exactly do you mean by young, mature? Like, this, it's too compressed and there's not enough. We don't know what's really going on. And so in this case, you want to increase the amount of words you use. So there's this sweet spot, and in this case, the sweet spot would be the rats used in this experiment were obtained from Charles River breeding laboratories and were derived from Sprague Dolly strain. The animals were sexually mature, 100 days old, and weighed 190 to 215 grams. See, that's more precise, and if someone's reading this paper, they get so much more information, and especially if it's someone that's really into that field, they'll get so much information from that. So that's something you want to do. Okay, now let's talk about that sweet spot. So you don't want to be too simple so that no one understands what's going on, and you don't want to be too descriptive so that people lose focus really easily. You want to find that sweet spot, and this comes from judging who's going to read your paper. Along with that, you want to see how other papers in that field are organized. If everyone's using, because there's a sweet spot, but it shifts between what field you're looking at. For example, biology probably uses more descriptive language because they have to explain what animal, what the animal was doing, what it looked like, as in the second case. But when you're talking about something like physics or chemistry, there's so many things that are already there, like pendulum. You don't have to say a pendulum swinging slowly or like pendulum swinging tirelessly. Like, no, we don't need none of that. So you want to look at other papers in that field, in that specific field. Like in physics, if you're looking at classical physics, read a lot of classical physics paper and see what their sweet spot is. And that's how you find the correct amount of words in a sentence. Okay? Now, language. There's a lot. There's active and passive voice, there's present and past tense. There's a lot to, look at. And so the passive voice should always be, so let's look at active and passive voice. The passive voice should always be used when writing scientifically. So when you're writing scientifically, no one really gives a damn about who performed the action. Like, I stopped cell growth. Like, look, you stopped the cell growth, no one cares that you did. We stopped cell growth. Like, no one cares. What we care about is the action itself. We don't care about the person performing the action. So when you talk about cell growth and stuff like that, see, in this case, the better one would be cell growth was stopped with. So here we're only focusing on the action. We don't care about the person that performed the action. So that's something that you want to use. Now, if you want to make it sound more succinct, you can also consider using active verbs. Oxygen was consumed by the mouse at a higher rate. See, that takes up more words, but then you can, if you use active verbs, you can say the mouse consumed oxygen at a higher rate. Okay, now present tense and past tense. Present tense and past tense are the only tenses that should be used in scientific writing. Because if you're writing with future tense, something's seriously wrong. Because you wouldn't write about an experiment that you're about to do, and so then there would be nothing to write about in the results, right? So present and past tense. Now, present tense should be used for established knowledge, and past tense should be used for results or actions that you are currently reporting. So this is kind of like how you want to split it. So in the introduction, you use present, methodology, past, results, etc., etc., as you can see. Okay, so now many of us are really confused with what is active, what is passive voice. So now that we've understood this entire slide, many of us are confused with what is active and what is passive voice. Well, first of all, I think many of our main focus should go to writing it in going to getting the tenses right? And then we can focus on active and passive voice, all the voices. And so if you can't write properly, if you can't use present and past tense properly, first focus on that. That's why I wrote just write it in past tense, or I should have wrote just focus on tense. I shouldn't have wrote just write it in past tense. That's a mistake. So focus on your tense first. Get your tense right first, and then focus on everything else. Then focus on your active and passive voice. Now that you want to ensure that everything is right, one thing, just get your tense right, and then stop using the word I. Those are the two things if you're really struggling, those are the only two things that you need to focus on. Get your tense right and stop using I. And then once you're done with that, you can look at passive and active voices and all that, and how that works. But right now, those are the only two things you need to focus on if you're struggling. Okay, the structure. This is how you want to structure your article, and in the next videos and the following videos, we're going to look at each of these, and we're going to look at how you can optimize, how you write in all of these sections. So your abstract is just, a summary of what you want. So usually what happens is that when you're submitting papers for publishing or for a journal, or if you're submitting for industrial users, the people don't have enough time because there's millions of papers. They're not going to read the introduction, method, result, blah, blah, blah. They're just going to read the abstract. And so abstract is if we're talking abstract is, the thing that, sells your paper. So you want to focus on the abstract. That's the first thing. But make sure you write it last, because it's a summary of everything you do. It's basically a summary with spoilers. So it's a summary with the results in the discussion. Next is introduction. So let's say I'm writing a paper about physics. Physics is this broad. I choose classical physics. So I'm in classical physics. Now, I'm not going to write a paper on in the entirety of classical physics. It's going to be something in there, right? It's Newton's third law, let's imagine. So in the introduction, I have to take Newton's third law, and I have to narrow it down. I have to take Newton's third law, and I have to narrow it down to something that I'm going to write about it. So let's say I want to point out a flaw in Newton's third law. So basically, I take Newton's third law, I introduce it on the big level, and then I narrow it down and then present what I'm going to write the paper on. Maybe say it's a flaw, how it doesn't work in space or something, and then that would be my paper. So I'm narrowing it down. So your introduction should narrow all the information down. Then the methods, you say what happened. I'm going to use a lot of diagrams over there. In the results, you want to say what information you got. And when you do that, you kind of want to set it up for the discussion. Because in the discussion, you show the implications, the applications, the importance of your data, and the importance of your insights, as we talked about in the beginning of the video. And so, in the discussion, that should be where you kind of bring it back, and then you kind of take that idea and you kind of expand it. So in the introduction, we brought it all in, and now we're going to take it all out. And so basically, in the introduction and the discussion are kind of opposites. So now that I've talked about Newton's third law in space, I'm going to bring it back out. I'm going to talk about Newton's third law in general. I took space out, and then I'm going to talk about classical physics. That's a very basic example, not a bad example. And then in the conclusion, I just say what we did and everything, and I kind of bring it to a summary. And what you want to do in the ending parts is that you want to give a clear direction about where your paper is headed. And so that would create the structure of your article. So this is the key structure. In the next video, we're going to look at introduction, how you write the introduction. Till then, I'll see you. And yeah, if you liked the video, I hope you learned something. And yeah, I'll keep trying my best. Till then, keep grinding.